Angela Duckworth, she was a high school math teacher at Lowell High School up in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's a school that only accepts students based upon their academic merit. And most all the students who graduate from there, they go on to Ivy League universities. And it was there that Angela met David Luong. David, he was one of those kind of quiet kids, never raised his hand in math class or volunteered to do problems on the board. Tests kind of always took him longer to complete. He often ended up staying after class, working on stuff, sometimes even into the lunch hour. But Angela began to notice that after a while, David, he began to ace his quizzes and his tests, and rarely ever even got like a single question wrong. And so she went to the department chair and had him transferred into the next class up for the accelerated gifted students. But David had kind of piqued her interest, and so she kept track of David and kept checking in on him and talking to him, and discovered, in seeing how the next class went, that he was actually having a difficult time. He was a little bit behind. He got some D's on some tests and actually ended up with a B in the class. And so Angela asked him, well, how are you doing? How are you dealing with that? And he said, well, I tried not to dwell on it, but instead I went to the teacher and I went and asked for help, and then I tried to focus on what I was doing wrong, and then to make the needed changes in order to progress what I needed to do differently. By the end of high school, David, he had graduated with top honors in calculus, earned a 5 on the advanced placement exam. He went on to college at UCLA, double majoring in engineering and economics, and then doing his PhD there, and then went on to work for the Aerospace Corporation, where literally now he works as a rocket scientist, this guy. Something about David's story had this major impact on Angela Duckworth, who, as a result, ended up leaving teaching to go on to grad school and study psychology. And the culmination of her work and her dissertation was published this last year in paperback as a New York Times bestseller book titled Grit, for which she won the prestigious MacArthur Fellow Award. What Angela Duckworth discovered, and what she talks about in this book, is this question: what is more important, talent or just effort? Just putting in the effort that's needed. She discovered in multiple contexts and settings, whether it was like in the military with groups like the Green Berets or the Navy SEALs, or whether it's athletes like marathon runners or football players, or even business entrepreneurs, even like those who do well in the spelling bee contest, discovered that talent is actually no guarantee. Cites numerous national surveys would ask, what is more important to success, talent or effort? Talent or effort. People twice as likely single out effort as being more important than talent. Same thing with athletic ability. And when you're asked, when a boss is asked, if you're hiring like a new employee for your job, what of the following qualities do you think are more important? Americans endorse being hardworking nearly as 5 times as much as they endorse being intelligent. She says the highly successful people, they have this ferocious determination to them. They're these exemplars of resiliency and hard work. They know what they want, not only having determination, but direction, knowing where they want to go. She says they have this kind of never give up attitude. It's this combination of passion and perseverance that make high achievers special. She says, in a word, they have grit. They have grit. In light of her study, she made this resolution for herself in her life. Here it is. Here's what she says. I am going to love my work. I won't just have a job. I'll have a calling. I'll challenge myself every day. When I get knocked down, I'll get back up. I may not be the smartest person in the room, but I'll strive to be the grittiest. The grittiest. Today we're talking about being a resolved people. Being a resolved people. We're studying through the book of Colossians as a church, And the next verse that we come upon says that one of the most important aspects that there is to being a Christian is to continue in it and to not give up, to continue in the faith and to never leave it, and to have resolve, or what Angela Duckworth would call grit. So why don't you stand with me as we read what God has to say for us today in His Word. We've got 1 week left here today in Colossians, and then next week we start Advent, the Advent season for the month of December, which is going to be great. This year we're looking at scenes of Advent, so we're going to look at the road, the fields, the star, and the stable. So it'll be a great time, good time to invite friends and that to come visit our church and be our guests. So we are in Colossians chapter 1, verse 23 today, which says, "If indeed you continue in the faith, stable and steadfast, not shifting from the hope of the gospel that you heard, which has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and of which I, Paul, became a minister." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. And pray. God, thank you for your word. Thank you for your church. Thank you for your many gifts. Most of all, thank you for Jesus. And I pray that you would help us to see him and his goodness and his resolve to love us eternally. Thank you that you are a resolved God. And I pray that you would impart that to us today through your Spirit, I pray. In Jesus' good name, amen. All right, you guys may be seated. If this is one of your first, second, or third times and you're a guest today, I want to particularly welcome you. Glad that you're here. My name is Duane. I'm one of 6 pastors or shepherds here. We all serve under our head pastor or chief shepherd, Jesus, and my job is to preach most of the time, so I'm the preaching pastor here, and hope you have a great time today. Everybody should have got one of these little slips of paper with a pen that's on your seat. We call this our next steps slip, and so you can put your name on it and your information, and we all fill this out every week, so you can be thinking about what you're going to put down today, if there's something that God is inviting you into or prompting you in, and what you're going to do this week as you follow God, and then we'll all turn that in to the giving boxes during our time of communion at the end, and then that goes to our staff and pastors who pray over the things and then do anything we can to help you and what God is calling you to. So you can be thinking about that in the next 30 minutes or so. So with our verse for today, you might have noticed that we just kind of cut in the middle of a sentence, in the middle of the paragraph, right? And maybe you were wondering about that. We dealt with the first half of the sentence last week, which was all about the change that God brings into our life when we really encounter and come to believe in and follow Jesus. The results are that we're brought near to God. We end up in relationship with him. He calls us holy and blameless, and then gives us this promise of heaven for those who believe in him. One day we get to be with God and with his people. But the sentence, it stops there and says, all those wonderful things, they are only true if. They're only true if. This little word if, it kind of drops this bombshell on us, saying all those things are only true if we continue. Only if. I felt like that one word if and what follows it was so important that we really needed to spend a whole week on it. And so that's why we kind of broke up the paragraph and the sentence there into 2 different sermons. So today's sermon is really kind of just on one word, if. So we're talking about if today. I've got 3 points for us today on the if. If we have a vital resolve, a lifelong resolve, and a universal resolve. And if you wanted to put it just into one line for today, it's this: I resolve to never let go of Jesus. It's Christian grit. Having Christian grit. Resolve to never let go of Jesus. So let's jump into our first point of vital resolve. To begin with, let's look at the language used here. If indeed. Indeed's a word that's put in there for emphasis. It's kind of like saying, hey, listen, this is really important. You might miss and pass over some of this stuff, but pay attention to this part. If indeed, this is really important. And then we get this word continue. If indeed you continue. What's the opposite of continuing? It's to stop, to quit, to give up. It's really easy to start things, isn't it? It's a lot harder to finish them. I had this friend growing up, and in his house, like everywhere you looked, there were all these unfinished projects that his dad had started, you know? Like in their living room, literally half the ceiling was filled in with drywall and the other half wasn't. Like, in the backyard, they had this deck that was like started and partially completed, but not finished. Even the color of the house in the front was different than the color of the house in the back. They're just like everywhere you look, like unfinished projects. But it's not just like my crazy friend's dad, is it? Like, any of you ever started a book that you didn't finish? How about a diet or going to the gym that you gave up on a while ago, right? New Year's resolutions, we got those coming up, right? We all know they're a lie. They don't work. Some of you might make it close to the end of the year, but, do any of you remember what your New Year's resolution was last year? Like, I can't. Like, it's long gone. Like, see ya. We're really good at starting things that we don't finish. I think about other things. The amount of people that go off to college but then don't finish is actually a staggering number. The average amount of time that anybody stays at a job this year is less than 4 years at a single job. The amount of business startups that actually make it are very few. Everywhere you look, marriages don't last. Like, money doesn't last. Even these kind of moments of happiness or insight, they don't last. It's simply really hard to have a kind of long-term commitment, to do something for the long haul. But it's what we need and what we long for, don't we? Those are what our next two words in our text point us to. Being stable. Being steadfast. Isn't that what we want in life? Stability? Some sort of sense of safety and security? That things aren't going to change. That it'll be okay. Like steadfast. Immovable. The word stable in our text is actually a word that's used in other places to talk about the construction of a house or a building. You want to have a stable foundation, a sturdy foundation to build on. It kind of echoes Jesus' story about, hey, don't build your house on sand. Build it on rock, something that's stable. So we have in our text for today is this strong warning against complacency and this call for Christians to have this commitment to Christ, to Jesus Christ, that perseveres. And the reason the warning exists is because that is not easy. It is not easy. It seems to me that we live in this culture of distraction and confusion so much of the time. We get excited about something, but then that excitement wears off shortly afterward, and we're over it. It's kind of like we get our eyes on something, give me something good, like believing in God and following Him and being part of His church and believing His promises, and we have our eyes set on that, but then all of a sudden, something catches our eye. Well, what's that? Oh, what's that? And then all of a sudden, we're off course again. We're always changing our minds, it seems, about who we're going to be and what we're going to do with our lives. We're kind of inundated with the grass is greener syndrome. Thinking like, well, maybe I just need to give up on what I'm currently doing, go do something else, and then that'll be better, and that'll make me happier. My life will be better. The grass is greener over there, doing that. It's not a new problem. This problem goes way, way, way back. The very first man and woman in the Garden of Eden, the beginning of time, they could not follow through on the commitment that they made to follow God. Same thing years later, their great-great-great-grandsons and daughters. God gathered them together as a people, the people of God, the people of Israel, delivered them out of Egypt not long after their journey out of there into the wilderness. The hundreds gave up on God, wanted to turn back, started worshiping other gods instead, couldn't follow through. Even with Jesus. Even one of his own special 12 disciples, Judas, sold them for 30 pieces of silver. Once the church got started, there were lots of people that were all about it at first, but then later abandoned the faith. Paul, who God did write the book of Colossians we're studying, he talks about some of these people in another book that he wrote, a book written to a guy named Timothy, a young pastor and church planter, whom he tells to be holding the faith and a good conscience. By rejecting this, some have made a shipwreck of their faith, among whom are Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I've handed over to Satan. Those poor dudes, like in the Bible forever for abandoning the faith. That's not the way you want to get your name in the Bible. John, one of Jesus' other 12 disciples, he talks about people who didn't continue with Jesus, didn't continue in the faith. Here's what he says. They went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would have continued with us. That word continue. But they went out, that it may become plain that they are not all of us. Are you of us? Are you of the faith in Jesus Christ today? This still happens, sadly, so much. We've had church members of our church that have not only left our church, but even left church altogether because they end up listening to, authors and leaders and podcasters and whatnot, saying that you don't really need Jesus, you don't really need church to be a Christian. Like there's this popular podcast going around right now, this guy named Richard Rohr and Rob Bell, whom many people are buying into and literally making a shipwreck of their faith. Here's how it happens. The Bible gives this warning. 2 Timothy 4:3 and 4. The time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions. And they will turn away from listening to the truth. They will wander off into myths. Listen, it is vital. It is extremely vital for you to grab hold of Jesus and to hold on and to never let go. If you don't, I guarantee you will make a shipwreck of your faith in your life. Now, we're a church that believes that we don't actually contribute one single ounce to our own salvation. Like, we believe that Jesus saves and that he actually does like all of the saving, 100% of it. Like, we don't contribute anything to that. It's not like he does 99 and we do 1%. Like, no, Jesus is the Savior, does all of the saving, and that salvation is a fixed and a permanent gift. So some have called this the doctrine of eternal security, or once saved, always saved, or the perseverance of the saints, different terms for the same thing. What the Bible is teaching in passages like the one that we're looking at today and the ones that we just read is that if we don't continue with Jesus, if we don't continue with his church, which is his body, his beloved, his bride that he loves, if we don't continue, then that's a sign that you never actually believed. You never actually had a real faith. It was you were just sort of flirting with spirituality that had to do with Jesus. It was just flitting and fleeting, but it actually didn't have any real roots. It wasn't real. 2 Peter 1:10 in the Bible, it kind of puts two and two together for us. It's written by another one of Jesus' disciples, the Apostle Peter. He says this, be all the more diligent to make your calling and your election sure. For if you practice these qualities, you will never fail. Okay? So if you think that you're a Christian today, which the reality is some of you think you're a Christian, you're probably not. That's what the Bible's telling. But if you think that you're a Christian today, you think that you actually believe in Jesus, you think that you actually love him, you think you're actually one of the elect that Jesus has saved with that permanent gift, then prove it. Prove it by doing everything that you can to follow him and to have him first in your life in every area. Prove it by following him and continuing to follow him and never letting him go. One guy said it well. He said, continuance is the test of reality. Continuance is the test of reality. When the going gets tough and you keep going, that's a sign that it's really, really, really real. There's something real there then. When everything in your bones wants to make you just want to let go and give up. But you keep going. Our church is named the Resolve Church. So Sermon Today kind of has to do with our namesake. Our name comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 2 in the Bible, which one translation says, I have resolved to know nothing while I was among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. Resolved to know nothing except Christ and him crucified. We're resolved in the Greek that it's translated from. It's like this word, it's a pretty robust word. It's like, I have considered everything, and I have judged or determined this resolve and deemed this of highest importance. Jesus Christ and him crucified. That's what our name is about. So we're basically like a one-issue church. Jesus. Jesus Christ and him crucified. Who he is, who Jesus is, and what he has done is what we are all about. That's it. We believe that all of the hope for our life, for every person's life, hangs on Jesus. And so we must grab hold of him and never let go. He is our only hope. We are resolved to spend the rest of our lives knowing him and loving him and making him known how good he is to as many people as possible. That's our resolve. So I've been asking myself what feels like kind of an important question to me. What's our identity as a church? Like, who are we as a people? You know, we have this name. Like, we're the Resolved Church. But is that who we are? Is that who we are as a people? Are we a people who have fixed our hearts and our lives on this one thing, on Jesus Christ together? Is that who we are? That we have committed together to never give up on him and to help each other to follow him and to continue with him all the way to the end. Is that our identity? That we are resolved to spend our lives together, resolving to know Jesus Christ and him crucified and making him known. Is that our identity? I don't know. I'm not totally sure about that. I'm sure there's some of us who are, but that's what I want to invite us into today. I think that's what God's inviting us in today, to fix it into our heart. Like, I dream of a people where we're not just this building. Like, we're not just these programs and functions and community groups and things that we do. Like, I dream of us being a people, a resolved people. It's something different in our city that really actually believe Jesus is the answer and are really grabbing hold of him, and that we're doing that together, and that we've got this long-term vision, not just direction, but determination to get there. I'm convinced that if we can be that, we can do that together, that it will yield just incredible fruit in our lives and in our church. But it's really being resolved together. Instead of it just being kind of tentative, where it's this kind of, well, if it kind of keeps doing this or that, or if nothing else that comes along, and if we make this it, then God can do great things in, among, and through us. In order to do that, we have to have this long-term vision. So let's talk about that for a little bit in our next point, a lifelong resolve. With this point, there's two pieces from our verse in Colossians I want to focus on. The first is where it calls us to continue in the faith. So anytime you see the definite article before the word faith, that's the word the, what it's talking about, then it's not talking about our act of believing, but what is believed in, the content of what we are believing. What is believed? It's the difference between personal spirituality, what our act of believing, and the propositions of the Christian faith, like what we are believing in. Okay? Difference between personal spirituality and the propositions of the Christian faith. Today, in our culture, it's popular and acceptable just to say, like, you just got to have faith, right? Just got to have faith. We're cool with being spiritual. Like Michael Jackson said so. You guys still know who Michael Jackson is, right? Like Thriller album, best-selling of all time. If you're like a really hardcore Michael Jackson fan, you might know his song Faith, where he talks about this. I think he kind of summarizes the air and attitude of our culture. He says, the power is in believing. So give yourself a chance. Climb the highest mountain. Swim the deepest sea. All you need is the will to want it and a little self-esteem, so keep the faith. You got to have faith. So what our culture is saying is you just got to have faith. It doesn't really matter what it's in. You just got to have faith in something, believing yourself or believe in this hope or dream that you have. I love Michael Jackson as much as the next guy or gal. But just having faith isn't the point. It's what you put your faith in that matters. It matters a lot. The propositions of the Christian faith are summarized in this one-word gospel that means good news. Our verse uses it to talk about the life that Jesus lived, his perfect life, the death that he died, and that he then rose again 3 days later. Did that all for our sins so that we might be in relationship with God and have a real hope and a real future. So it's really a matter of what we focus on. When our eyes look to or get off of that and onto other things and other hopes, other solutions than the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus for our life, that's where we end up in dangerous territory for our souls. I mean, you might be here and you might be our guest today and you're just kind of checking things out, and that might be where, with your life, you've been setting your hope on this or that and this thing, and it's just not working out, and that's why you're here. Then there's those of us here who we've put our hope on Jesus, but man, it gets hard. And then we get our eyes off of Jesus and start thinking, well, maybe something else will work better for me and for my life. The danger sometimes that we can fall into is where we just start thinking that, like Jesus, he's just kind of the front door to Christian spirituality, and then we move on to bigger and better things. The truth is that we never move on from Jesus. The gospel is always the answer for everything that we need in life. What it really boils down to is having this lived relationship with Jesus Christ. And relationship with Jesus, like all relationships, that relationships do not remain static. None of them do. Like if you don't invest in a relationship with somebody, that relationship, it will eventually wither and die. Like good marriage tip, like if you don't spend time with your spouse, you don't talk to your spouse, you're probably going to end up with marriage problems, right? You have to invest in the relationship. All relationships die if you don't invest in them. So part of what we're learning here, what we're seeing, is learning to be loyal. Learning to be loyal. We live in a very unloyal culture. Like we abandon things and abandon one another very easily. Learning to be loyal our entire life long. What a calling. That brings us to the second thing from our verse. At this point we're called to not shift from the hope of the gospel. Now hope is a future thing. It's set on the future. And hope, it's not just this wish or this dream. Hope is a secure promise that's rooted in a real reality. Kind of like a paycheck. So like a paycheck says if you put in your time and you put in your hours, then you're promised this paycheck in return for what you put in. The hope of Christ is the promise that for those who believe in Jesus and his death and his resurrection for their sins, and you keep believing it, all the way to the end of your life here on earth, he will receive you into eternal joy in his presence in heaven forever. That's the promise. And the cool thing is that Jesus is the one that earned it. And then we just get his paycheck. The Christian faith, it's one that's oriented toward the end. It's oriented toward that future day. Our hope is fixed on that day. Everything we believe in is anchored in that future reality that we are looking towards, the promise of that day for God's people. And so that's why we need this lifelong resolve. Deciding to follow Jesus and embrace him as Savior is a lifelong decision. That's why it's the most important decision that you ever make in life. True faith is a lifelong journey. So, I mean, if you're here and you're not a Christian, this is like the biggest ask you could ever make, to make a decision for Jesus Christ your entire life long, all the way to the end. True faith is a lifelong journey. Eugene Peterson, he was a scholar, pastor, and church planter. He wrote what probably the most famous book is The Message. It's like his own commentary on what the Bible says. Some good stuff he did with that. His personal commentary on the Bible. He wrote another book actually titled A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. Here's what he says in it. He says, it's the essential thing in heaven and on earth is that there should be a long obedience in the same direction. And thereby results, as has always resulted in the long run, something which has made life worth living. It is this long obedience in the same direction, which the mood of the world does so much to discourage. I think that's right on. He actually died just last month, this last October. His family released a statement when he died. Here's what they said. It was apparent that he was navigating the thin and sacred space between earth and heaven. We overheard him speaking to people. We can only presume we're welcoming him into the paradise. Among his final words were, let's go. And his joy, oh my, the joy of the man remained joyful right up to his blessed end, smiling frequently. In such moments, it's best for all mortal flesh to keep silent. But if you have to say something, say, holy, holy, holy. He made it to the end, victorious, fought the good fight, received the crown of life, seeing Jesus and entering into all that he has prepared for his people. I was talking to Michael Horton recently, who's one of my personal living heroes. He's a pastor actually here in our city out in Santee, and he's just a master theologian in the scholar world. He's just one of the best and so well respected. And he told me this. He said, Duane, your job as a pastor, it really boils down to one thing. Your job as a pastor is to prepare people to die. My job. To help you make it to that day. To help you to get a resolve in your life. To resolve that Jesus is the answer and to grab hold of him and to hold on to him and to never let go all the way to the end to where you will breathe your final breath. And you will receive that new immortal body like Jesus' resurrected body and enter into the joys of heaven. Life like now without sin, sorrow, and suffering. Do you think about your death? I mean, I don't mean in a morbid way like, hey, how many people are going to come to my funeral? And what good things will they say about me? Do you think about your death, the end of your life? What is the goal of your life? Do you have a vision for your life like Eugene Peterson had, to have a long obedience in the same direction? One where you continue in the faith your whole life. Tell you what, being real honest today, the older that I get, and I know I'm not that old yet. There's some of you far older than me. I'm only 40, and one of our older folks, Diana Fries, told me this last week that I'm still a young chicken, whatever that means. But the older that I get, I just think that being a Christian is the hardest thing that you can do in life. I just think it's really hard. So difficult. Sometimes I feel like I tried. Like, I gave it my best shot, but life won. Like, it beat me down. Giving up can be really, really, really tempting. It can be really tempting. In those moments, I've come back to God's grace. And with the fervor of a drowning man, I've grabbed hold of the rope of Christ with both hands, and I grip it real tight. And I say, Christ, you are my only hope. You are my only hope. There is no hope that the world has to offer. The promise of joy and salvation in Jesus Christ is incomparable. John Calvin said that it can withstand all the machinations of hell. Christ is enough. That's why we need him, not just to get in the front door, but our whole life long. If we grab hold of Jesus, if we grab hold of him and we never let go, we'll be all right. We will be all right. He will carry us to the end, and he will meet us there. Well, I got one more point for us today, a universal resolve. This point comes from the last part of the verse. It says, if we've heard this message, the good news of the gospel, and that it's been proclaimed in all creation under heaven. Now, there's kind of two ways that you can take this verse. One way is to say that creation itself, like the ocean, the sun, the stars, the flowers of the field, everything is trying to tell us the good news of God's grace. The other way is to understand it saying that the message of Jesus and the offer of salvation is for every creature, every person, everywhere you go in the world, regardless of who they are or where they are. To be honest, I'm not really sure what the correct interpretation is. Both kind of hold weight. I mean, it's true that the offer of salvation in Jesus, it goes out to everyone. Verse 6 at the beginning of the book, it mentioned this, saying that the gospel is in the whole world, bearing fruit and growing since the day you heard it. It's also true that there's passages like Psalm 19:1 that said the heavens declare the glory of God, the sky proclaims his handiwork, and passages like Romans 8:22 and 24 say the whole creation, it's been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. Not only the creation, but we ourselves, who are the first fruits of the Spirit, have been groaning inwardly as we eagerly await for the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we are saved. Looking forward to that future day. So the creation, it mainly tells us that there is in fact a God who exists. Like, you're not stupid to believe that. There's good evidence for that. But it also tells us of our need for God. The death and decay that it undergoes, the creation goes, says that it's longing for resurrection and life, which Jesus says comes from him. So, I don't know, that's both the arguments. Like, I'm not sure which one is correct. I kind of like both of them. Either way, both are telling us that the resolve we need is a universal one. It's for the whole world, and the whole world is screaming out for it. The real question for us is whether we hear it. Whether we hear it from creation or we hear it from another person. The way it's meant to work is that we hear the message of Jesus, the good news of Jesus, the gospel, and then we grab hold of it and we never let it go. That's actually how the anglicized version gospel came about. It's a kind of a smashing together of Godspell, because people, when they heard the gospel, it was like they were stunned and came under a spell, a God spell, a gospel that was so good that it changed their entire lives for their entire lives long. Whether we hear it, grab hold of it, and never let it go. When we embrace it, like Paul, who wrote Colossians, did, we join in this universal mission to spread it, and so as many people as possible can hear it too. We pay attention. It's everywhere we look. We know what we need. We know. We can't make it on our own. We need the resolve of Jesus Christ. It comes down to who we're listening to, what we're listening to, what we're hearing, and whether we're hearing about Jesus and grabbing hold of him. All of us here in the room, we're all different. We're at different places in our life. We're doing different things with our life. There's one thing that unites us together, that can unite us together. It's Jesus Christ and a resolve to love him and live for him all of our days together. We need Jesus and we need to hold on to him. Well, I started the sermon today telling you the story of Angela Duckworth. And she's not a Christian as far as I know of, but in her study of human beings, what she thinks it comes down to is that what we need is grit. We need grit. Here's the thing. Throughout the whole sermon, what I've been saying is that we need to be resolved, that we need to grab hold of Jesus and we need to never let go. We need to continue with him. But here's the truth. You can try as hard as you can to have that resolve. But sooner or later, your grip will weaken. And you let go. And this is the good news of Jesus, is that he will never let go of you. His grip never weakens. He was resolved all the way to the end. No matter how much resolve we can muster, it won't be enough. But there is one who is enough. Jesus Christ. He resolved to come into our world. He lived a perfect life. He resolved to go to the cross. He rose again. He lives today. He has resolved to hold on to you. John 10:28, he said that none can snatch us out of his hand. And Philippians 1:6 says that he who began a good work in you, he will bring it to completion all the way to the day of Jesus Christ. He'll help you get there. So today, church, we can rest being assured in the resolve of Jesus Christ that he has got us. He's got you, and he's got our church.